Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 10. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Praise God for the hearing of these sacred words.
I'd like to echo what Don just said. Thank you to our praise team for guiding us in worship today. Thank you to Amanda and to Becky and Cass. Thank you very much for the gift of music today. I should also say thank you to Don Travis for being willing to step in there and help us as liturgists today. Don does so much for the life of the church, and let us say thank you to Don for all he does as well. Throughout the month of September, our emphasis, our theme's going to be the stories that shape us, and we're going to continue that this morning. And as we do, let us begin with a moment of prayer. Would you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, we do ask that you would grant us the grace that we could be present to you, even as you're here present with us. Lord, I ask that you would take the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts, and you would work and move in such a way that they would be made to be acceptable in your sight, for indeed you are our rock and you are our Redeemer. Amen. We all have stories that we tell ourselves. We all have stories that shape us. These stories, they basically determine in some ways how we see ourselves. They can determine how we see our neighbors. They can even determine how we see God. Last Sunday, we began our series about the stories that shape us, and we talked about grandparents. It's our grandparents and the stories that they shared with us, for many of us, that gave us the gift of faith, that taught us what the faith looked like. And I know many of you have grandparents that have basically fed into your life and have helped you in terms of your relationship with God. And at the same time, as we honored our grandparents last week on Grandparents Sunday, we also were able to raise $2,000 for our friends at Harper Elementary School, and so we should definitely celebrate that as well. They're not only family stories that shape us, but certainly there are also cultural stories that shape us. I mean, think of it this way. Have you ever been to a Little League baseball game? Or have you ever been to a soccer game? And you've probably seen it. There's that person, there's that parent that, what do? They scream and yell at the referee. They yell at the coach. They might even yell at their own kid. If you've ever been to one of those games, you've probably seen it happen. I mean, it's everything that I can do. I want to pull the person aside and be like, 8-year-olds, man, seriously, come on. But really, what's happening there? Well, that's a story on full display. That's a cultural story on full display. And what is the cultural story? Well, the cultural story is success. Success is everything. And failure. And failure is dangerous. That's a story. Not only are there cultural stories, friends, there are also stories that we receive through the news and through the media. This last week, it's been a heavy week. My gosh. More shootings, more tragedy, more murder. Just a couple weeks ago, I stood up here and I said, I'm convinced that we're at the point as a society where it is time for us to begin to move into an arena of constructive response to this violence. We can't just sit back and continue to do what we're doing. It's not working. Just 2 weeks ago I said that, and yet here we are again in the same circumstance, the same situation. We need better from our leaders. We need to do better too as a people, in terms of what we say about one another, in terms of how we treat one another. One person I think that said it really well was Shane Claiborne. I saw a post of his on Facebook this past week, and if you don't know who Shane Claiborne is, he works with the homeless in the city of Philadelphia. He's a wonderful author. He's a wonderful Christian leader. Shane Claiborne said, in terms of a Christian's response to the violence of our society today, Shane Claiborne said that, number one, the thing we need to remember is, first off, we're all made in the image of God. We're all of sacred value, no matter who we are. We're of sacred value, made in the image of God. Number two, Claiborne said that anger is normal. Righteous anger, in fact, can be healthy. Because what righteous anger says is, it's time for a constructive response. Righteous anger says, let's do something about this. Righteous anger says, let's do something to make it better, to heal the situation. Righteous anger, it is oriented toward an action. But the thing he went on to say, I think is very helpful though, is that we have to be careful, because if we're not careful, the anger, it can begin to bleed into hatred. And what is hatred? Well, hatred says, I want to make them suffer. Hatred says, I want to make that person suffer. Or hatred says, I want to make that group of persons suffer. You see, righteous anger is oriented toward a solution. It's about trying to get something done. But hatred's about a people or a person. We want to make them suffer. And as Christians, we have to pray that our anger, friends, does not become hatred. So there are stories that we tell ourselves from our families. There are stories that we tell ourselves from culture. There are stories that can shape us from the news and media. But above all, as a people of faith, the story that should shape us is the story of our faith, right? But here's the thing about faith. Faith is complicated. We might not have all received the same story when it comes to our faith. For some of us, when it comes to our faith and the story that we've been told about God, for some of us, we may have been given a judgmental view of God. A God that's angry, a God that's punitive, a God that's out to get us. The image that comes to my mind is like a God that's kind of like Mr. Clean. God doesn't want to get God's hands dirty. And God resists the impure and the unclean. That might be our image of God. And that's not a healthy image of God. And that's precisely the sort of God that Jesus is challenging in our lesson today. Just moments ago, Don read the lesson, Luke chapter 15. The story begins with Jesus. What's he doing? He's eating with tax collectors and sinners. He's eating with the outcasts and the marginalized. He's eating with the outsiders. And what begins to happen? Well, the religious people, what do? They begin to grumble. And why did they begin to grumble? Because Jesus is associating with the people that they do not believe that he should be associating with. And why? Because the God that they believe in does not associate with people like that. That's the story of the people in the lesson. They are grumbling because grace has been offered. And why are they grumbling? Because grace has been offered, because they have bought into the view of a God whose love must be earned. It's in response to that Jesus tells the parables for today. The first one is the one about the shepherd, right? Like the shepherd has 100 sheep. The shepherd loses one of the sheep. He goes off and looks for the sheep. You know the story. And Jesus asks the group of people, he says, now who of you would not go do this? And the answer to that question, it's a trick question actually in the parable. The answer to that question is nobody would do that. That's crazy. Why would a shepherd leave 99 perfectly good sheep behind to go look for the one that ran off? You've just exposed 99 other sheep to danger, right? Like, you wouldn't do that. And yet that's not the point Jesus is trying to make. The point Jesus is trying to make is that the God that he believes in, the God that he's there to teach about, the God that he's there to embody, is a God that operates like that. It's a God that goes and looks for the one that's lost, that's reckless, that will allow oneself to be put into danger, put oneself into harm's way to go find the lost one. It continues on, though. He tells another parable, the one about the coin. Lady has 10 coins, loses 1 coin. She goes looking for the coin. She gets the lamp out, looks for the coin. She burns up a lot of valuable lamp oil to find the coin. Mind you, that cost a lot of money back in those days. She's still looking for the coin. She finally finds the coin. And then what does she do? She throws a party. Did you know parties are expensive? I got 2 little girls in our household right now. Leslie, my wife sitting in the front row. Parties are expensive, are they not? Yes, they're expensive. And this lady, she throws a huge party for everybody because she finds a coin. And here's the value of the coin. The coin is valued at 1 day's living wage. She throws a party that costs way more than that 1 coin that she finds. What's Jesus' point? That's how God is. God's extravagant. Throws a party. Gives way more than God should. This is a wonderful, a life-giving, a hope-filled version of the faith. And yet so often we get sidetracked, don't we? We have this wonderful, hope-filled, life-giving version of the faith, and we get sidetracked. And how do we get sidetracked? Well, we get sidetracked by slipping into legalism. We slip into rigidity. We slip into this idea that people have to earn it. One of the things you might know about me is I'm a pastor, yeah. My dad was a pastor, sure. My grandpa was a pastor as well, which means we have 1 or 2 stories we can tell about the church. My grandpa tells a story back in the 1970s when he did his first wedding for a divorced couple. Person comes waltzing into his office with the big Bible because it caused quite a stir in the church. Person waltzes in with the big Bible and says to my grandpa, "We are forbidden to do this." My grandpa responds, 1 word. I have 1 word, he said. Forgiveness. We as a Christian people believe in a God of second chances. For my grandpa, grace and not the rules had the final word. My dad, fast forward a little more, he has a few stories to tell. One of the stories I remember him telling, though, when I was younger, was there was a time where my dad invited Santa Claus to come to the church luncheon around Christmas time. 1980s, caused quite a stir. Person shows up my dad's office, Bible in hand, and says, "God told me to tell you," so lady says to my dad, "God told me to tell you that we can't have Santa Claus at the luncheon at the church." My dad responds, "Well, God has not told me nor the church council that information yet. Not shared that information yet." Liberty and freedom, not rules, had the final word. My brother and I can remember a time my brother and I went to a revival service as kids. And we were just kids. And we were wearing our baseball caps. And we went into the service and sat down. And this old gentleman lost his temper with us because we were wearing hats in a church service. He says to my dad, "You remove those hats from those boys' heads, or I will remove the hats for them." In that moment, as I watched him, I thought to myself, how quickly, and as a kid, I was even able to pick up on this, how quickly appearances become more important to us than relationships. You see, there's a spirit, there's a thread that weaves through these stories like this. And you have stories like this too, many of you that have been exposed to religion in the worst sort of way. And it's the tune of legalism. And legalism, friends, it's the worst thing that the church has to offer. It really is. It's the worst thing that we cannot offer anything worse than this as a church when we offer legalism. It's horrible. Some of the characteristics of legalism, real quick, let me just share a few of them. Legalism insists on rigid conformity to the rules. It's about the rules. Legalism, it builds relationships on fear and appearances. It bullies. And spiritually speaking, legalism grows from the false story that God's love has to be earned. It's always the same tune, different day. It starts with God's love has to be earned. God is someone we have to be afraid of. Then we have to beat everyone up and put them in our box. That's legalism 101. What's grace? Well, grace is much different than that, right? Grace says it's not about the rules as much. That's not how we measure our success. Instead, grace measures success by the quality of our relationships that we have with others. Grace is interested in the flourishing of other people. We want to see other people flourish and do well. Grace is much more than just an emotional feeling in the Christian sense. Instead, grace is about willing the good of another. It's about living for the good of another. The best picture of grace, the best verse of grace that I can find in the Gospels, of course, comes from Jesus. And in Luke chapter 6, Jesus gives us a wonderful picture about really what grace is all about. He says it right here. He says, be compassionate as your Father is compassionate. Now, notice something here. What Jesus is teaching us is that a life of grace is not about earning God's love. Instead, a life of grace is about responding to a love that's already there. Notice his picture of God. We are compassionate. Why? Because God is already compassionate with us. And just push it out a little further. The word that Jesus uses for compassion here, it would have gone back to a Hebrew and an Aramaic word. And the Hebrew and the Aramaic word for compassion in those days, it literally meant womb, womb-like. We are to be womb-like as God is womb-like. God is life-giving in Jesus' mind. God is embracing in Jesus' mind. God is nourishing in Jesus' mind. And so God is, so Jesus was, so we are called to be. That is a life of grace. And here's what it means. It means as a people motivated by grace, that sometimes we go against the rules because that's the life-giving thing to do. So what does this mean for the church? Well, number one, I think if we really get a sense of this message of grace that we're called to proclaim, this story we're called to live into, the thing it means for the church, first off, is we have to change our way that we typically evaluate success. A lot of times in the church, we're like everyone else. We evaluate success by the numbers. I call them the ABCs of ministry: attendance, building, and cash. How many people did you have? How much money did you raise? Those kinds of questions. That's how we evaluate success. Now, I will say that those metrics are to some extent important, but that is not our picture of success. Our picture of success is not about the numbers. Our picture of success is that when people come here, did they experience grace? Did they feel a sense of embrace? Did they feel a sense of welcome? Because the truth of the matter is, we might have a room full of people. It might not be graceful, though, right? And that's not success when it comes to the gospel. That misses the mark. So the first thing we do is we have to shift our understanding of success. The second question I'll throw out there as I think about Jesus and this idea of grace is we need to ask the question, who are the lost ones? Who are the ones that have gone missing? Like the sheep in the parable or the coin, the one that fell through the cracks. Who are the lost ones? Some of the folks that I think about, groups I think about as I've reflected this week, are the elderly. A lot of times within the life of the church, it's out of sight, out of mind. If you're not able to come to church, we forget about you sometimes. But I will say that when I get to finally get enough time to go see some of the elderly of our congregation, and I'm able to go to the nursing homes and see them, or I go see them in a hospital, I will say Jesus is 100% right. There's so much joy in just connecting with someone that has kind of been forgotten. It's wonderful to go see the elderly. Another group of people I think about are, quite honestly, young men. Statistically, it's undeniable. Young, straight, white men are the ones that usually do these shootings. It's true. They feel isolated, alone, disconnected. They go online and they get radicalized. They need friends. They need mentors. If there's ever a group of people that we should care about, it's people who are isolated and feel alone. Here's the group. The shooters that we see again and again are straight, young, white men. It's true. I also think about children. Especially I think about children in the state of Indiana because we have a daycare here at the church. And one of the things we've experienced in the last year is a significant reduction in the amount of money the state is providing for the children who typically use the vouchers. What that means is that there's a significant and growing list of kids who need daycare, but they can't get daycare because the state and the government has cut the funding. They're just sitting in line. And these children typically would come to our daycare, but they can't come right now because we've cut the funds as a government. And the thing I keep thinking about is, well, if that's the situation we're given, then what's it mean for us to do the Christian thing in the midst of a circumstance like that? So far, I've been just talking about the church and thinking about ways that we can embody God's love as the church, but let me just push it out a little farther and just think about it in terms of individual lives. Your life, my life. Who's someone that's gone missing in your life? It could be a child. It could be a parent. It could be a friend. Who's gone missing in your life? To practice grace is to reach out to that person. And I know sometimes situations are complicated, but that's essentially what it looks like to practice grace, to reach out to the lost one that's gone missing. And so the question is, I'll wrap back around to it. The question we have to wrestle with today, I hope we can wrestle with today, is what is the story we're trying to live by? Is it a story that says love must be earned? Is it a story of fear and appearance and domination? Is it a story that tries to bully people and put them in their place? Or is it a story that's defined by grace? That's shaped by Jesus' understanding of who God is. It's life-giving. It's nourishing. It's willing to go out of one's way to go find the lost ones, both within our lives and in our community. I have to wonder, If that idea of compassion and that idea of grace, if that had the final word in our lives, in our families, in our churches, and yes, as a country, I wonder if that had the final word, how different the story would be that we are telling right now. I'll invite the praise team to come. We're going to sing one last song together. I invite you to please stand and let us sing.